everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, and Derek, you have returned back from
I have,
the
yeah.
ills of last week, and
Yeah.
here you are.
Yeah.
I'm guessing watching the Canadian women helped cure you of all your ills.
Yeah, basically instant cure. It was an instant cure, actually. Yeah, no, last week, not feeling too great. I think, I don't know what exactly caused it necessarily, but yeah, we normally record on like Monday night or Tuesday night, depending on the week and stuff, but like, yeah, could not talk. Bad cold, bad throat infection, whatever you want to call it. Um, I would have at this point in the show already have been coughing for 5 minutes and probably requested to stop just based on asking how I'm doing. So it would not have been good, but I appreciate that you decided to go it alone. And we still got a little bit of an episode out. So I mean a lot of stuff has kind of happened. I mean, obviously, last week we had the sad news that the Dallas Jackals were no more, right? Which is obviously, another year, another MLR team folding, which it's just never fun. I get,
No.
there's going to be growing pains in a new league, and MLR most certainly still is a new league. So I'm never like necessarily overly surprised to see a team, be unfortunately fold or, be taken be removed from the league or whatever. But it still doesn't make it feel any better, for the players, the fans, everybody, the staff, everybody that put their heart and soul into the organization. It always
Mhm.
it always kind of stinks. And I think it's even worse because they had the best jerseys and branding in the league, and we won't get to see it on the field again. So that's ultimately that makes it even sadder. It's the best looking team in the league.
Yeah, and I don't know if you caught the interview with Brock Gallagher, basically saying that they had all been essentially blindsided by this.
Yeah,
When he
I
said
mean,
like the players had, and it. I don't think it came from like the coaching staff. It came from the managerial staff as
yeah,
well that
I
they decided to sell the team, and then once they made the playoffs, up the price tag. And in the press release, there did seem to be an indication that the team was in the process of being sold, just that it wouldn't be confirmed by the 2025 um, season. That could be the financial call that takes place
yeah,
just at the end of this year. But either way, there seems to be something in the works. Obviously, it's not going to be quick enough that the players will have like an immediate um,
yeah.
channel to go towards.
So
Um,
are we going with 11 teams in MLR next year then?
well,
Is that what
this
it
I
is?
think this is probably going to be like the thing that now takes place in the off season. Because I mean, last year we had, well, I say last year, last season, because at the start of the year, Anthem was announced
Yeah,
as a developmental team in conjunction with MLR and World Rugby. So it may even be a case as well that there's a location in um, you know, the west of the United States that is able to have another developmental team because the focus is now to get as many players as possible ready for the 2031 Men's World Cup. So I'm saying that what MLR should be doing is contacting World Rugby and saying, like, look, we have Anthem. Yes, they weren't great last season, but that was very last minute. If we can have another team in a Western location, central travel hub as well. Um, and we only focus on American players and theoretically it's the team that Colorado was talking about when they
yeah.
left in
Well,
2020.
they don't exist anymore either.
No, exactly. That
Like
but
literally,
that's the
it's not.
idea.
It's the American Raptors. The SLAR team doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, and they've left, and it looks like they're leaving Super Rugby
They
Americas. Probably.
the only thing with that, and I think with Anthem and stuff too, I think in watching the season, and yes, I get that it was last minute. Like, I think I would rather roll with 11 teams than try to force a new team in at the last minute again. Having seen
Well,
that,
that's what I mean. I was like, if you give them an actual off season to prepare to
even
get players in,
well,
and so like get like all the American players from the Jackals, if they were to have an opportunity with another team in the west
sure,
of the
yeah.
US, absolutely. I'm not saying like give them 3 or 4 weeks turnaround. That would be
I was gonna say,
like we've already seen how that happens.
I
Like,
think my second point though with that though is like if you put in a tenth another team, like that's fine. I think you need more runway than now. I think that didn't work this year,
mm,
but also I think I honestly like I don't think development teams belong in the MLR at all. Like
yeah,
it should
I
it
especially after what we've seen
developing
this year, I can fully
football.
agree with that. However, what I'm saying is it's marketed as a developmental team in the sense that World Rugby is putting money to develop American players, and there's a specific caveat of having
Then
um
World Rugby should be helping fund like a development league for the MLR if that's what they want. They should be like a they should be funding to build like a tier below the MLR to help develop
mm,
players. Because like a professional league, which is like the MLR, you know, is the best level you can play in North America. That's the
yeah,
highest. Like, that's not a development league. That's the best league,
mm,
right? That's like, you know, for a comparison, the United States has their hockey program has the national development team as well, right?
yeah,
They have a team that they call the national development program, right? They
yeah.
don't that team doesn't play in the NHL, right? Like they
Yeah.
play in
I see where you're
they
coming
should
from.
be
I
like
mean that is I think we've seen that with Anthem this year. I mean, obviously they were very hamstrung by the fact that they were
yeah,
just getting teams like third, fourth, or fifth choice player. The way I'm marketing this is that you basically have World Rugby come in and say, we will help fund this team on the caveat that we have like more American players.
and just
But
and just
the
have
intention is that this is going to be a prelude to getting a new owner in. And, maybe something can be worked out so like the license fee is reduced and that maybe provokes more investment and stuff. Also, just mathematically, having 12 teams in the league, it makes
think 12.
things a lot easier as well. But again, this is something that is yet to be seen. Obviously, we always say like hoping to have more opportunities for North American players, specifically Great White North American players, Canadian players, because as we both know, having more Canadians on your team helps you win the
That's
Shield.
something would.
So,
Yeah.
the math is mathing. But yeah, again, for now, the Dallas Jackals players, the staff, the support team that was there. Our hearts go out to you. We're hoping that the process of the dispersal draft for players that is coming up is going to be very smooth and opportunities are available. And yeah, I guess we'll just have to see what happens with MLR for the 2025
Like,
season.
you got to feel for guys too, like Mitch Richardson and Nick Ben, who are kind of
Yeah,
back
absolutely.
back years now, right? So like that also.
Yeah, and even like the aforementioned like Brock Gallagher, it's like his first professional season. He gets called up to the national team, and now
Yeah.
he's realized he doesn't have a team at all. So yeah,
Dallas
really
had a lot of
hoping.
there's a lot of Canadians on Dallas. Um,
Yeah, no, really, really hoping that something
hopefully
positive comes out for all those guys. Anyway, that's we've talked about the guys a lot. Let's talk about the girls because we have the WXV back, and this year WXV1 is taking place in British Columbia, specifically Metro Vancouver. But we've also had WXV2 in South Africa and WXV3 in Dubai. That's all happening the weekend just gone, this weekend coming up, and the weekend after as well. I think it's also playing very well. I know, like last year, there was a lot of talk about it falling at the same time as like the men's international window as well, and there was a lot of issue about that. I mean, yeah, obviously WXV1 taking place in New Zealand meant that it wasn't really clashing with any of the tier one men's games, but for us Canadians, I mean, especially those of us on the East Coast, have to wake up at like 3 in the morning to watch a game. So definitely preferring it being on the this side of the Pacific instead. But let's talk about the game itself. The second game of the day, Canada versus France. Um, Canada had won this fixture the previous year. The year before that, they got nilled in the bronze final.
Yeah.
Um, but it started off pretty well. Paige Farrell's getting the first try of the game. But then, and then it seemed to be a lot of anything you can do, I can do better. So France, sorry, Canada score a try, then France score a try, then Canada scores a try, then France scores a try, and then just before halftime, we have Letitia Royer getting a first. We have Bermudez getting a second. So we have 24-14 at halftime. And then in the second half, we have Pauline Bourdon just doing wonders and slicing through the Canadian defense to bring France back into the game. But then we have Royer going over for a second. Then we have Condi scoring a try, and then we have Totosi, and finally, on her first cap of 15's senior women's rugby, Asia Hogan Rochester going over for the try at the end, and Tessier, unfortunately missing that conversion, but at that point, wins a win. Final score 46-24. Um, where do you want to start there? I mean, obviously, when we're talking about women's rugby, especially Canadian women's rugby, it's so good because it's more often than not a win. I mean, this year entirely, it's been all victories. So, where do you want to start?
Well, I think yeah, I think as you said, it's been great all year. I think like for me going into this game, like my biggest question was, oh yeah, Sophie DeGoody's hurt. And like how is that going to, impact the team, right? Because it's not just that you have lost your best player, right? It's like you're down the best player in the world, right? Like
Mm,
just
yeah.
a little bit of a completely different thing to kind of have to deal with, right? And especially with Sophie DeGoody, because I think that's part of what makes the Canadian women's team so good is that whether you want to talk about men's rugby or women's rugby, there isn't a player in the world like Sophie DeGoody, right? And Canada, Kevin Rouet and the coaching staff there, like they can build a game plan, like an attack structure, a defense structure around Sophie DeGoody and her skill set of, as we kind of always said, like, like the weird, like almost combination of Richie McCaw and Dan Carter that she is, like in a weird way. Like she's got this all the skills of a back, but is like, also at the same time the best back row player in the world, right? Um, and you know, as you said, like, she's a forward that kicks goals for you. Right. Like teams that teams like the Black Ferns, like England, France, all the USA, Ireland as well. Like they would have to normally, like, they got to prepare for that, right? Because it's like it gives a dynamic to the Canadian attack, the Canadian defense structure that no other team in the world has, right? And that's part of what makes Canada so successful is Sophie DeGoody. So my biggest question, I think, going into this game was just what would Canada look like without Sophie DeGoody? And the answer was still, yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, no, they're still a pretty great rugby team. So Obviously, Gabriel Senft came in. She played number 8. That's like, normally De Goody's position. Fabiola Forteza brought into the back row as the replacement there as well, right? So it's like, they had great games. Letitia Royer stepped up huge. She had an unbelievable game as well, got named player of the match, right? So like the pack was ultimately still dominant in this game, right? And the backs, were still able to carve up the French defense, right? Which obviously that resulted in, a nice try from Ferries. Bermudez had a couple tries. Tessier was finding, a lot of gaps to put players through and stuff as well, right? Um, they, every back seemed to cause a lot of damage when they got the ball in hand, right? And they were able to, like, get through the French defense and stuff. So like, quite frankly, it's like even being down like the best player in the world, I think like the most confidence building thing like for Canada going like to build off of in against France. They got to play Ireland next week, and as they continue to build through the tournament, right, is just like, yeah, like they lost the best player in the world and didn't seem to miss a step at all. And I think that's like the biggest positive you can really take away from this game for Canada.
Yeah, I think the big thing coming into this tournament was that, England are world number one, super dominant
Yeah.
team. I think like they're on another extended winning run at the moment. Um, Ireland, Canada have only played them, I think, twice or three, base a handful of times, haven't played them in nearly a decade. And, while they seem on the ascendancy, and we'll get to the Ireland New Zealand game later,
That's one way of putting
um, you know, coming into this tournament, they're a very like unknown quality.
it. Yeah.
They obviously came third in the Six Nations, but you don't. So um this was like the fulcrum game. This is the game that's like on the middle of the balance beam. It's like we know that Canada can beat France, but we also know that France can beat Canada.
Yeah.
So you come in with that like trepidation as a fan. Obviously getting like a try a piece in the opening 10 minutes. But it did also like set up the game for what was going to be. So speaking of France's performance, Menage's try in the 26th minute,
Uh,
France securing that 50-22, and then
that was
Canada just,
that was
taking the pardon?
I said that was oh that try is nasty. It's so good.
Yeah, that was just like excellent gamesmanship of just realizing you're in the right place at the right time. You have players available to you. Canada are like they've seen the ball go into touch, so they've like decided to slow down and taken advantage of it. No one there to stop France from going over and getting their second try of the game. Um, and like I said,
Yeah.
Baudon has already proven herself time and time again to be like an excellent player and an excellent scrum half. And she was able to find all the gaps in the defense and get over. And, being down 24-14 at half time, bringing it back to, being a 3-point game at that point, 24-21. Um, sorry, not a 3-point game, 5-point game, 24-19. And being able to bring the momentum back to France at that point. Obviously Canada were then able to you know turn it back with Royer getting her second, and Royer, player of the match, absolutely monumental. Picking up 2 tries as well definitely helped that case as well.
Mhm.
Um and so you've just the thing that obviously comes down to it is like discipline, because I remember seeing something like, I think it was probably about like the 50-minute mark. Canada and France had pretty much like the same number of penalties. But then you get towards like the end of the game and fall. for France, she illegally brings down the driving maul, which gives the advantage to Canada and probably would have been a penalty try if Totosi had been unable to get over. Then France are down to 14 players for the base nearly like the rest of the game. Only like the final few minutes they have 15 again. But in that time you have continual pressure from Canada. You're not getting any penalties. You're not doing anything that's having points conceded. And yeah, I think there were a few handling errors from Canada that I wasn't overtly thrilled about. But again, it was also at the point where you're more than two scores ahead, so fine, I guess. But stuff to work on for this week. Obviously, Canada, I think, are the only WXV1 team to not have any like warm-up games prior to this, which was um a choice to be made.
Money, more resources.
Yeah, that brings me on to something else at BC Place, which is the crowd size. So, in the build up to the WXV, there had been an article on the BBC website about um, the fact that the England players had been at in in and around Vancouver, and people were basically surprised to see them there. And they were saying that the marketing for the marketing for WXV has been great, and that the women's team deserve more than empty crowds, I believe was the uh, words used. And I fully agree where England are coming from, because of course they're the ones who are the world number ones. They've had fantastic numbers with the Six Nations, and also England bid against Canada to host the WXV this year.
Mhm.
Um,
I, so
so at the same time, I also understand that this is not Europe, so you can't have three nations able to get to games in a certain location as easier for your fans as, say, being held in England or in France or in Ireland in this case. Um,
yeah.
Also, this is only the second year of WXV, so
So I
you also have to balance that as well. And and as well, we have WXV2 taking place in South Africa and WXV3 taking place in Dubai. And I think for like the Wales Australia game in South Africa, that had a crowd attendance of fewer than 300. But it's like then you say, okay, what's the likelihood of Australian or Welsh rugby fans being able to make the journey to South Africa? Yeah, it's a bit hard. Now, World Rugby have said that they are looking into ways to like improve WXV in the future. Um, so while I understand that the crowd sizes are small, especially compared to the Six Nations, I also understand the reasons why they're smaller.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a few things like with the BBC comments and stuff. One, watching the game, yeah, the crowd was small. Like, I I think for all three games, there's no announced attendance that I've personally seen. Maybe that
Mm.
number comes out later, but just on like a visual, like BC Place looked empty, right? It's not the best visual look. But I think there's a few things with that. It's like one, it's the English team, right? Um, like rugby is what? The is it a top 10 most popular sport in Canada? Probably not. Is it top 15?
Mm.
Maybe top 15,
Mm.
top 20. Like where does rugby really rank among like sporting popularity and stuff, right? And like and yeah, so it's like, of course, yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that there are people that the English team or any of the other teams are encountering in Vancouver that are surprised to learn there's a major rugby tournament happening, right? Like that
Mm.
doesn't really surprise me. I think that that's more of like a culture. I wouldn't necessarily say a cultural issue, but that's more of like a cultural thing of like, yeah, like you're holding a major international tournament in a country that, despite the unbelievable success of the women's rugby team, yeah, like it's low on the totem pole as far as, Canadian sports goes. Um, but that being said, I think that's exactly why you need to do this in North America. I'm gonna say North America as a whole, right? Like, especially for the women's game, like I think like there, so you look at what's happening in the women's game in North America right now, like, and I'll include the sevens in this just for like a broader scope, but like both sevens teams, Canada, USA, they got medals at the Olympics, right? Which is huge,
Mm.
obviously, right? There's going to be a 15s league next year, a domestic women's 15s league next year, right? Which, hopefully will help grow the footprint and everything. And I think World Rugby, I think, would be smart to identify that, as we've talked about more on this podcast, there's a massive women's sports boom happening in North America
Mm.
right now. And
Yeah.
like rugby really does need to be a part of that and get in on the ground floor of it. So, you know what, maybe the attendance, yeah, maybe the attendance in Vancouver isn't going to be as good as it's going to be in London or in Auckland or something, right?
Mm.
And I think that's kind of to be expected a little bit. Like I hope it grows as the tournament goes on. I'm not in Vancouver. I don't really know what the on the ground marketing of this looks like, but hopefully it does improve, because I think like World Rugby, and I think even like the English players, I think need to realize that like for like unlike like women's rugby isn't going to be structured, as far as like the global powerhouses of the sport are not going to line up with the men's, right? And like Canada and USA, I think, are probably the two most important countries for the growth of women's rugby, right? When they're introducing this new women's rugby league, right now the best league is the one in England, right? The North American league, especially if they can get the players, depending on what type of players they get in their first year, has the actual ability to be the best league in the world, right? Like
Mm.
right off the bat. And I think that's going to grow. And I think evidence that you can already kind of see of that growth in North America is like Iona Mare and just what's been happening in her life for the past like
Mm.
few months, right? Obviously coming off of a silver medal at the, or not silver medal, bronze medal at the Olympics, right? Right now did a Sports Illustrated swimsuit photo shoot, right? And is now on Dancing with the Stars. She's
Yeah.
followed rugby account across social media, right? And it's like she's the most followed rugby account across social media, and it's just like that's how popular rugby can be in North America if you kind of let it grow and foster and stuff. And it's like, yeah, maybe this WXV, yeah, maybe the attendance will be a little low, but I think if you're willing to do the work to put in the work with the Canadian and American market, right? On the women's side of the game, at the very least, it's probably going to be it has the serious potential, I think, to be the biggest hotbed for the sport for World
Mm.
Rugby. And I think World Rugby needs to identify that and realize that. And yeah, like they should be having major women's tournaments constantly in North America, right? Because Canada is the second ranked team in the world. USA is not far behind, right? And there is a market here, and there's the serious potential for that to grow. And it's kind of already shown in like, maybe like a year, 2 years
Mm.
of like real tangible success for both Canada and the USA right now,
Mm.
right? So it's like, I don't know. I think I wish the crowds were bigger. Yes,
Mm.
or whatever. But I think it's also short-sighted of like England to be complaining about crowd sizes when it's like, yeah, but what if this is the first tournament and in 5 years we have a bigger crowd than you guys do, or like
Yeah.
just as big or whatever, right? Because like I mean, half of Premiership women's rugby, like most of them, a lot of them are Canadian, right?
Yeah.
Like you already understand that draw. So it's like, I mean, I'm not right. Like there's a lot of potential with women's rugby in North America, but you got to like you can't judge it off the attendance of one game. I feel like it,
Mm.
right? Like you got to give it time. I do hope the crowds get bigger though, because it did feel small, but I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah. And yeah, this um was a triple header at BC Place to get things started with WXV1. The opening game was the USA versus England. England continued their usual fashion, winning by multiples of scores. Final result was England 61, USA 21. But let's talk about the third game that was on.
Yeah.
The curtain call between the Black Ferns and Ireland. So, to put it into context, Ireland a year ago was competing in WXV3. They finished bottom of the table in the Six Nations. They picked up wins against Kazakhstan, Madagascar, and their only real competition was a game against Spain, which they won by 2 points. Now, previously, Ireland have played the Black Ferns twice. They picked up the win in 2014 when they hosted the Women's World Cup. And then the Black Ferns reminded them that they were the Black Ferns. So, one apiece. So coming into this game, uh, so it's been like 8 years since they last played each other. And I think for a lot of people, yes, the Black Ferns finished second in the Pacific Four series, but you know, it's the Black Ferns. We all know how this result is going to go. And then Ireland said, no, no, I don't think it is going to go the way you think uh, it should be going. And absolutely, we had, you know, I actually found out that Ireland pushed throughout this game entirely. They were able to upset and break through the Black Fern defense. Um, but it was I thought it was a very even game. Black Ferns had 56% possession. So, just holding onto the ball for a bit longer. Um, but the other thing as well was that Ireland were getting tries, but they weren't getting conversions. So um, Ireland outscored the New Zealand in tries 3-5, but only got two conversions, whilst all of New Zealand's tries got converted, and then Renee Holmes picked up two extra penalties. So the first thing I want to mention is that the decision to go for the posts um, in the 19th minute and the 57th minute, when they probably should have gone for the corner, especially in a game that, so much can be decided, because you only have like three matches to try and push yourself for championship contention, was a mistake. I think New Zealand lacked the confidence to at least attempt to get those scores on the board. Because if they had, then they would have won this game by 2 points, and
Yeah.
which is 2 points at least. Maybe if their conversion rate went as well, 8 points. But Alfie Wafer getting double just from her drives and able to get that over. Erin King being the all important player that got like the final try of the game. Um, but for those who have only just seen like the score and realized, oh, it was a try at the death that got Ireland over. They were 17 all at half time, and just before the second half, New Zealand were able to get that converted try to get them back into the game. So like Ireland were leading at one point prior to the final push at the end. And then there was time for a restart. Now, obviously, New Zealand kicking the ball, they had to make sure that they retained possession. But the big mistake there was that the ball didn't go 10 meters. So New Zealand collected it illegally. That allowed Ireland to scrum. They were able to get the ball, kick it into touch, and get another win, making them the only team in World Rugby to have a winning record against the Black Ferns.
What are they, 1-0?
2-1.
2-1. Oh, good for them. Um, yeah. So like, I mean, obviously that's a huge win for Ireland, right? And I think
Yeah.
everybody's going to second guess a variety of decisions that New Zealand made during that game, but you know, ultimately at the end of the day, Ireland's the one that kind of does come out on top, right? Like, you're saying it's like, hey, like, maybe you should go to the corner instead of kicking those points, right? And it's, that kind of like revisionist history is always predicated by like, well, what if you don't score in the corner either, right? Like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
Ireland wins, right? So, and it's at the end of the day, Ireland wins, and it's like that's really all that kind of matters here, right? And the crazy thing is that dramatically shakes up like the WXV like table and expectations and everything. New Zealand's got England next, which is crazy, because
Yeah.
it's obviously the best team in the world. You're coming off a huge loss, but also, you know, nobody ever wants to play New Zealand after they lose. So
Yeah.
that's a bit of a wild one. And then Ken Ireland's got Canada, right? So a little
Yeah.
you go from the number, I guess what, New Zealand's now number three, Canada's two now. Um,
Yeah. Canada ascend to second in the world rankings. So
cool. So for the second straight week in a row, Ireland, you got to play the second ranked team in the world, in back-to-back weeks. So like and but I think that's kind of the important thing here for Canada is to like, you got to watch that game tape and the film and stuff and be like, yeah, you're not gonna, you're probably not gonna walk over Ireland, right?
no.
Like, and it's, you got to take them seriously because if you don't, you're gonna probably end up like the All Blacks, right? And I kind of think that, the way Canada's schedule is kind of rolling out, I kind of think it's kind of like the perfect way to build up into this tournament. Like you said, they didn't actually
Mm.
have any preseason or pre-tournament games, right? So I think getting a game like France, and in this game, I don't think Canada played the best rugby that they're capable of. I think they got another level
No.
that they can go to. But that's kind of the nice thing about having that schedule is you can build through the tournament. And, you know, like that's such a epic victory for Ireland. Do they have the gas in the tank to do it again? Right? Or like, is it going to be maybe a little too much of a high for them to be able to reach those heights again? I guess, we'll find
Mm.
out next week. But I mean, what a start to the tournament ultimately, though, because I don't think anyone
Yeah.
expected that.
Yeah. And I think it is basically the pay attention, the kick up the backside that maybe Canada need is like, yeah, you dropped the ball, you were able to do this against the French, but Ireland were able to do this against New Zealand. So this is where we can see where Ireland's strengths are, and this is how we can like work around them.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's going to be the game that comes up this coming Saturday. That'll be at 3:45 Pacific, 6:45 Eastern on Saturday, October 5th. The game will be available on TSN, so that's where you can see Canada versus Ireland. And just to finish off, this tidbit of information came out today through the Rugby Canada social media channels is that Dr. Carolyn McEwen, the UBC scrum and lineout coach and former Canadian rugby player, has joined the Canadian women's rugby team coaching staff for the WXV as part of World Rugby's Gallagher High Performance Academy. So, congratulations, Dr. McEwen. Hopefully, pick up a lot of stuff. I know there's a lot of talks and seminars going on during WXV in Canada. So hopefully this is a fantastic experience for you and really helps you out with your coaching duties at UBC. And yeah, I think that's all we can say. We have the anticipation of that next game coming up, as we said. Available on TSN is all of WXV1, whilst WXV2 and 3 are available on rugbypass.tv. And if you want to catch any of the league games, including the Premiership and the URC, those are available on Sportsnet. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more as well as our written pieces on our website, rougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcast on Spotify, S4P, and Apple Podcasts. We have our YouTube channel at the Rouge Rugby. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, all at the Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can people find you on social media?
At Brissette the Jet across all social media platforms.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. And that's where we're going to end this episode. Derek, good to have you back. Glad that you're on the mend. Thank you for joining me. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.